welcome to Literary Prospects, where we talk to authors and literary professionals about books, publishing, and the writing life. I'm Kelley Vick. I'm the host of the program, and in just a moment, it will be my pleasure to introduce today's guest. But first, a reminder that if you like what you hear, please do take a moment to subscribe. It helps us out, and you can make sure you never miss an episode. Also, we've opened a Literary Prospects shop, so if you're looking for bookish shirts, totes, and gifts, please check that out at literaryprospects.etsy.com. And to grab books featured on the podcast and check out more curated book lists, you can visit the Literary Prospects bookstore on bookshop.org. And last, but certainly not least, if you're interested in extra content on querying and publishing that's only for our members, please consider joining the Literary Prospects Patreon at patreon.com/literary prospects. We'll leave all those links below in the show notes. And now, let's introduce today's guest. Marcy Dermansky is the author of the critically acclaimed novels Hurricane Girl, Very Nice, The Red Car, Bad Marie, and Twins. Her new novel, Hot Air, is out now. Marcy's short fiction has been widely published and anthologized, appearing in McSweeney's, Guernica, the India Review, Linny Letter, and elsewhere. And she's received fellowships from MacDowell and the Edward F. Albee Foundation. Marcy lives with her daughter in Montclair, New Jersey. Marcy Dermansky, thank you so much for joining today to talk about your searing new novel, Hot Air. Author Roxane Gay says unapologetically and pleasurably absurd. This novel is a romp, full of the witty, razor-sharp prose characteristic of all of Dermansky's books. I cannot recommend this novel enough. Booklist says Dermansky's slim volume packs a punch. It's full of gimlet-eyed observations about privilege, desire, and satisfaction, or lack thereof, daring and wise. And one more, Library Journal says a scorching satire of wacky relationships, iced with a juicy layer of saucy seduction. Dermansky distills a potent brew from the sad consequences of power disparities among people. No area of domestic human emotions is safe from her biting wit and analysis. Mother-daughter, employer-worker, husband-wife, rich-poor conflicts all get their moment in the spotlight. It's a laugh till you cry experience. So with all of that, what can you tell us about Hot Air? How would you describe the book?
That's a great way to start. This book was really fun and easy to write, and I think maybe that experience of writing is like what's coming through about it. The quotes that you read, which made me really self-conscious. But this book starts with you read it. It's a date, not a blind date, a first date where a hot air balloon comes crashing into the backyard and into a swimming pool, and so the absurdity starts right from the beginning. And from there, I just went on to what would happen. And it actually literally started from a writing prompt from a friend. And that was the prompt. And I was never expecting this to be a novel. It was just a goof. And I turned it into a short story. And the short story, then my agent was like, I love this, turn it into a novel. I'm like, I'm not going to turn this into a novel. And then a year later, I had nothing to write. And I was like, you know what? I'll go turn that into a novel just because. And so I just love how it actually turned out to be something real. And it is absurd, as Roxane said, which I love. And it goes into the point of views of all four people who are on these dates who decide to do a partner swap. And that sounds so funny, but even that, this is too long for a back cover, but a partner swap is funny, but that's something that's based on not my generation, but the generation of my parents. And that was something that I was aware of as a youth, that was something my parents were doing. And so it's interesting when you write a book that's completely silly on the surface, which it is, how much truth I'm sneaking into it. And so, yeah.
You said it came from a writing prompt. What was the exact prompt?
The literal writing prompt was literally saying, write about a date where a hot air balloon comes crashing down into the back. Yeah. And the interesting thing was a friend of mine, it's a friend's newsletter. It's called Emily Writes Back. But another woman also wrote that short story. So we ended up sharing stories, and that was a really fun experience. So, and I do things like that. Yeah, like I'll use a writing prompt. I have trouble beginning if this is like a if this is a Zoom for writers. You know, I
Yes, yeah.
every novel, I have one of the hardest parts for me is starting, like, and having an idea, and then deciding, is this a book I want to commit to? Because when you write a novel, you're committing to the time of writing it, which is years sometimes, and then the time of publishing it. And so if you pick the wrong idea, it's just so much time, and sometimes you can pick a project that doesn't work, and then anyhow, I'm really almost stunned that this is my next novel, and I'm really really pleased by it. But yeah.
How do you know? How do you know
Mhm.
when it's something that, okay, I can stick with this
Yeah,
and this is going to be a novel?
it's a great question. I mean, and I definitely have written in between. This is my sixth novel. I have written things that haven't been published that I've gotten to page 80, and I'm like, no, I don't think this is good. I think if there's a feeling, I think plot is really important. And I feel like you can write the greatest beginning and opening of any story, but if you feel like if you can't carry it on, if it doesn't work for you, I think that to me is what will stop a project. If I get to a place where I'm stuck, or if I have a subject where I actually once started a novel that was set on a spaceship. And it was, the beginning was just so great. Like, I still love those first four chapters, and everyone's like, why don't you keep writing them? And I literally, once I get all my characters onto the spaceship, I didn't know what to do with them. And I can't write science fiction. And it was an experiment that didn't work. And so I think there's an idea with writing that a lot of people just talk about writing as suffering. Like, a lot of writers say that they hate to write.
Mm,
And I feel like when I'm writing, if I hate it, if I hate the experience of actually writing, then that's not good for the writing. Like, I feel like it
mm,
shows. Like, I feel like I hate sitting down to write. I
mhm.
dread the idea of getting down to work. But once I'm writing, I really love it. And it really should be fun, and ideas will come. And so I think it's really good to understand that, like, that the whole process isn't torture, because why would we do it? Like, it's really pleasurable. And I think that is why I can continue with something if I just feel like I can keep going. If every time I try when I write to, like, get to the end of a scene, that you always just want to write the next scene, and so that's how it works for me.
Do you ever plot or outline, or are you?
I don't do that, and sometimes I definitely suffer for that.
Mhm.
Sometimes I can write with my novel Hurricane Girl. I didn't outline or plot, and I really wrote almost 100 pages where very little happens once I got the character situated, where she just literally ate turkey sandwiches and was sad. And I think the writing of those particular scenes was all good, but you can't have 100 pages of that.
Mhm.
And I wonder if I had an outline, if I wouldn't have written those bad pages. But with my writing process, if I know what's going to happen, all the joy is taken out of it. I can't surprise
Mhm.
myself, and
Mhm.
so that doesn't work for me. And so I actually love to read writers' interviews and listen to them, and I find it so fascinating. But I just feel like one writer's process isn't the other writer's process, and so I think it's great to, like, listen and absorb. Like, so when I say I don't outline, that doesn't mean I'm saying don't outline, because I think for some writers, if they didn't outline, it wouldn't work for them. And I definitely feel like well, it's funny about time. I do waste time writing. But I feel like, if that's another problem of writing, is if you're not willing to waste time, if every time you write something, if you think, oh, I need to write this because I want to keep it, then there's so much internal pressure
Mhm.
that you might never finish anything. So it's you just have to know that you're going to write some stuff that's going to be thrown away, and usually it's worth your time to have written it. Yeah.
I want to get back to some specifics on hot air in a minute, but
Okay.
since we're on this track,
Yeah.
I do want to go ahead and ask you what your process is. When you get that sort of spark of an idea and you get going, how does it get from there to the final draft?
Um, it's different. It's really funny. I think about it. My process is different for every novel. Like, every
Mm,
novel, I had one novel that I wrote all in cafes. I wrote a lot of hot air. I ended up writing in a friend's house. She had a writers group. It was so fun. If anybody else has a beautiful enough space to do this, which I don't, where she hosted 3 people and we came like twice a week and we wrote for a certain amount of time in different rooms and then we met for lunch. I didn't go to a residency, I didn't travel, but it was just wonderful. And then sometimes I like right now I'm actually sitting in my office and I do have an office, which is the first time I've had an office in all 6 books that I've had one. And so I forced myself to use it because it's such a great thing to have. But I feel like one processes just always change for me. And some writers aren't like that. Some people know what works and that's what they do. And I wish what works for one book would continue to work, but it doesn't. Um, and I don't write every day, which is something that people believe in so much. And I think it's great to write every day. What I do think is that what I love the most is being in the middle of a novel. And I think why I write novels and not short stories is because they do take so long. And so that's a great thing because every time you sit down to write, you're working on your novel and you have a file and you're not just staring, you have a blank page, but it's not super blank because you already have the idea and you can keep going. And so short stories, can be finished too quickly. I don't like that.
You say you don't write every day, but do you
No.
write like in sprints and then maybe not write for weeks, or are you writing a few times a week, or what is that?
Yeah. I mean, when I'm working on a novel, I probably write every day, but I might take some days off. I mean, when I'm really working, I have this strange, this has happened a lot. I do a lot of great writing sometimes because I'm a single mother. So sometimes my daughter goes off on holidays and that's a sad thing for people. Lots of people who are divorced would know that. I tend to do a lot of great writing on holidays because I'm like, oh, I'm not here with my family. I'm just going to write today. And that's an interesting thing about being a writer as opposed to having an office job or any other job is you don't really get days off. Saturdays, Sundays, I don't feel that way. But I do feel like as a parent, for writers who are parents, I tend to do most of my writing when my daughter's at school. That was the best thing ever is when the baby finally goes off to preschool and kindergarten. You're like, I've got time. But in between novels, that's when I can really literally take weeks and months off. And right now, like I'm not writing, but I'm trying to write essays and I'm doing like wonderful interviews with you. And so I'm not writing at this moment because the idea of starting a new novel is just daunting. But I am working on a novel now, so that's good. But I'm having somebody read it, so I'm taking a few weeks off again. It's just a funny up and down period.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Peaks
don't
and
even have a
valleys.
straightforward answer to any of your questions.
No, those are perfect answers. I love it. Getting getting back to the specifics of hot air a little bit and how that works. We get the point of view of almost every character who shows up in the novel. I can think of two, I think, Johnny's ex-wife and his son.
Yeah, they don't come in. Yeah.
But we don't actually get in their head. But that means we get, I think it's 6 perspectives in about 200 pages, which is a lot to pack in, but it doesn't feel rushed at all. We really get to know these characters. How did you do that?
Yeah, thank you. The interesting thing about this is there are 6 point of view. There are 2 couples, and so and I've heard a lot of there's Julia and Jonathan are the people in the hot air balloon, and then they're the original couple, which is Johnny and Joni. And I write a line in the first chapter where Joni's like, it's never going to work between me and Johnny because our names are too much alike. And then I throw in 2 more J's. And so I have 4 J names. And apparently that's really confusing, for which I apologize. And yes, it was on purpose. But because of that, they're the 4 main characters. And so when I write a book this is my 3rd novel with multiple points of views, it gives you an immediate structure where I keep an order. First it's Joni, and then it's Johnny, and then it's Julie, and then it's Jonathan. And sometimes I will get confused and write the wrong point of view before, but I'm like, no, I've got to keep that order. So there are 4 main points of view. But the great thing about writing a novel is I created a structure and a rule system, and then I broke it because I added 2 more points of view. I added in Joni's daughter, and then the very last point of view, I think she probably has 2 sections, and most of the other characters have like 10 sections. And then Vivian was a character that was referred to, and she's a personal assistant. And I didn't realize how important she was going to be until I was writing. So in fact, I was actually done with the draft of the book when I decided Vivian needed to come in. And she only has 2 sections, but I can even ask you what I'm finding really interesting is several people have told me that Vivian sections are their favorite of the whole book. And so that's just wild to me because she came in so late.
Yeah, I feel like it would be a totally different book
She's really
without putting her point
judging
of
the
view
other
there.
characters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that extra perspective that sort of like
Mhm.
takes us out of this whole, I
Yeah.
don't want to give too much away,
Right.
but yes, I do feel like it's wonderful to
Mm.
have her perspective there. Well, you just said that Vivian's perspective came in later. When you were writing the original for adults, were you jumping back and forth the whole time in the writing, or do you go through sort of one perspective and then
No,
the
I
other?
understand that question immediately. No, I jump back and forth. I get to the end of a scene and then I go to the next character. I don't write one whole Julia scene and one whole Johnny
Mhm.
scene. And one of the reasons why I love multiple points of view is it really helps you move the plot forward because every time you get to the end of a section, usually when you write the next section, you're going to maybe jump back in time like an hour. In this case,
Mhm.
because this book happens over a very brief period of time, but you're just always moving forward. You're always moving forward, and that it really helps your plot and it also I think with having multiple points of views, it's really fun when one character experiences one thing one way. When you get to see it again through another point of view, it's just really fun. Like as a
Mhm.
reader, I always love that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
How different
Mhm.
the same event can be through different people's eyes. Yeah,
How do your characters come to you?
that's great. And that's the thing. I don't always know. I don't always know how they come to me. Um, I could just be straight out there and say, because I am a single mother, and so Joni is not me, which is always there's always that, but she has a lot of me. She just does, and I feel like any fiction writer that isn't taking from their own life is just kind of wasting material.
Mhm.
So there's that. Johnny, who's the other love interest, is a fictional character. He's 100% fictional. And it's interesting is that I was once supposed to go on a date with somebody that I met at a block fair, and we never went on the date ever. Like literally, like we made the date and we canceled. And he's a whole character in a book. Like that's just how I imagined him to be. So that's very funny. And we are Facebook friends, so maybe he can. Anyhow, he's just fictional. There's a billionaire in the book, and I don't really know too much about billionaires. I actually had to go back into the book and like make things seem more like, oh, this is how a wealthy person reacts. I had to
Mhm.
make them a little different. But I mean, he's a Jeff Bezos character in my mind, like a kind of head of Amazon, and so there's that. And
Mhm.
so you take from real life, you take from life, and what ends up happening is they end up creating themselves. They end up talking, and I mean, I love that about writing is that you don't know what they're going to do until they do it. In the first chapter, so it's not a spoiler, Julia, who is on a date with her husband, it's an anniversary date, is so pissed off with her husband that when they're all just sort of sitting around after the accident, she's like, why don't we switch partners? I didn't know she was going to say that until she said that. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And that's why I like to write, I think, because that's really fun. And
Mhm.
so, yeah.
8-year-old Emily
Yeah,
is is also a character that we get
right.
perspective from in this story. At what point did you know you were going to include her
I
perspective?
didn't know she was coming at all. Like that was one of those places where I was stuck, and she's definitely. If I had a rule system, she doesn't fit. And there's definitely a thing about writing where I say like I love writing short chapters. It's something I do these days. It's really like you stop, but sometimes the next time you open your computer, you sit down, and when anybody picks up a novel and they read it, it just seems like that's how it's meant to be. That's if
Mhm.
they work well. You don't want to edit it. You don't want to change it. But I literally know that one day I sat down and I didn't know what to write, and suddenly I was writing the daughter's point of view, and I didn't expect to do it. And I actually kind of had a feeling like I just felt like I rarely Maybe I never. This is the first time I've ever written from an 8-year-old's voice. Like it's supposed to sound like an 8-year-old. I tried really hard.
You did well.
So much. I didn't know. Like, there's part of me that's just like, oh, I'm going to give this to my editor and she's going to cut it. You know what I mean? And I
Mhm.
have in the past written points of view that have been taken out. I just thought, I'm just going to write it and I'm going to leave it in and see what happens. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, that's
Mhm.
how that came about.
And it came out easily, the 8-year-old.
Yeah, it came out easily. The thing about this book is like we go back to the beginning of this conversation, is this did start from a writing prompt, which is not how I start most of my books. It
Mhm.
wasn't very serious. It wasn't something that I thought I wanted to write about. But I mean, I think a lot of times with writers, whatever you don't want to write about actually is what you want to write about, and you're
Mhm.
scared. There's some fear. I don't know. But basically, when I decided after a year of not working on this to work on this, I said, I don't want to waste time. I am worried about wasting time, as all writers are. I said, I'm going to write this really fast. I'm going to write this so fast because it's not what I want to do. And I just want to be writing right now. This woman had invited me over to her house to write, and I was sitting at a desk, and I was like, I have to write something. So I told myself I was going to write this in 3 months. And I wrote a draft. I did that. I wrote a draft in 3 months, which is one reason why it's really short. And I think in a funny way, because I didn't care that much and because I didn't really believe in it, I was unfiltered. It's like, oh, the daughter comes in, I'm just going to do it. I sometimes as writers, we can be our own worst enemies and we can edit ourselves. We can say, oh, that's no good and stop. I just, whatever came into my head, I took. And that's what happened with this book.
That is
Yeah.
so interesting because I wanted to ask you
Mm-hmm.
about the length of
Mm-hmm.
of the novel.
Yeah.
It covers just a couple of days of time, as we've
Yeah.
said, but thematically, it covers so much. There's motherhood and marriage and money and age and many layers of power dynamics. I still find myself thinking and thinking about it. So I was wondering if when you started out, you were setting out to write this short, tight piece.
Yeah. No, that's a, I think, I mean, I've written a 300-page novel. I tend to not write long books, and I don't know why. I mean, sometimes I tend to feel like when I read books, I just read a 360-page debut novel, and the writing was just so wonderful, and I felt like it could be 100 pages shorter. I just like things that are short. But what I really appreciate you're saying is that like this book really kind of just takes place over a long weekend. But I feel like things happen in life, in our lives too. We can live 6 months a year. We can live for 3 years where nothing happens that's of note, and we don't want to write about that. I feel like, and that's something I learned in graduate school. Another writer always used to tell our class. It was Antonia Nelson, I think she said, why are you starting here? You know what I mean? So when I started this book, it's like where I picked it. I picked it somewhere where important things were going to happen because this single mother hadn't been on a date, let's say, in 7 years. So this is where I pick it, where something's about to happen. So I think that's why so many issues and themes become crammed into a short amount of space.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The situation in which the characters find themselves is absurd,
it
as
is.
said.
Yeah,
But yeah, the questions, and you alluded to this too, the questions that the characters are asking themselves throughout the book feel relatable.
yeah.
What do you think it is about the absurd situation that lets us more deeply and readily explore these issues we're faced with?
Yeah. Thanks. I feel there's something really interesting about wealth
Mm,
that I think there's just wealth inequity. And I feel like as a not wealthy person, I feel like it must be, and I'm not even being kidding, wealthy people must always have a kind of feeling like, do people really like me or do
mm,
they like what I have to offer? And
mhm,
I always get with my wealthy friends, I always feel like they want to be generous but to a point, you know what I mean? I feel like there's always like a funny like, do you like me or do you like my swimming pool? And
mhm,
it's something that I've just experienced through life. I mean, we all maybe not. I know people who have homes in the Hamptons. I know people who have much less than I do, and it's something. I definitely think about, you know what I mean? And it's something
Mhm.
that as a parent, like my daughter always has friends that have like so much more than she does. And I always want to apologize to her about that. And that's not right. I don't know. So I
Mhm.
think it's just an aspect of life. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
But so then it's not absurd, you know what I mean? And so and I don't like one thing I sometimes it's so funny because writers are supposed to compare themselves to things. Like I wouldn't want to be compared to like and I have been to that TV show The White Lotus, which is
Oh,
also
yeah.
absurd.
Yes.
But it's just putting these really, really wealthy people into this mainly insanely gorgeous hotels and just seeing how terribly they behave. And so there's always an interesting question like, do we hate these? Are characters sympathetic or not sympathetic? And that wasn't the beginning of the sentence, but in the White Lotus, I tend to find that nobody is sympathetic.
Mhm.
And one interesting thing in terms of my work is, I mean, a lot of people. By the way, I read my Goodreads reviews. I find them so interesting. Is a lot of people love this book and don't like any of the characters, and I'm like, really? And
Hmm.
I guess it's okay. Do you know what I mean? And like, I think that I think one of the things that I love to do with writing is I love to do with point of view, or even if it's a one person narrative, is I like the interior monologue. And I can do that in third person and I can do that in first person. But I feel like that's something you can't do in a movie or a TV show because then it would be voiceover. But I love to go into people's heads and
Mhm.
have them think what they think. And
Mhm.
I think that a lot of what we all think is just not appropriate to say. You know what I mean? I don't know
Yeah.
if you feel that way, but I feel
Yeah.
like I think things all the time. Like I'll be at a parent teacher conference or I'll be out with friends. I'm just thinking things ping, 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 and I can't say them or I'll just get into so much trouble.
Mhm.
And in my books, I just have people. It's unfiltered. They just think what they think, and I'm wondering if that's why people dislike my characters so much. And it's fine. Like I like for people to feel what they feel. I lost the thread of the conversation. It was about absurdity, but I think
Yeah.
that's what it's from. Like I love that there's a character named Julia who's a billionaire in this book, or a billionaire's wife. She's a billionaire and she loves her cats more than people. I think that's really true, and I think you're not supposed to say that, but she thinks that. I liked her for thinking that, but I feel like other people might not. Yeah,
I'm thinking about as we're talking about this, is there a difference? Just thinking about the Goodreads reviews,
yeah,
is there a difference between likability for
hmm
a character and sympathy for a character? You know, that maybe people understand your characters, even though they may not
yeah.
particularly want to hang out with them this weekend, you know?
Right. I would hope. Maybe I hope so. I mean. I mean, that's a possibility that people might not like these characters, but still hope for good things for them. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. My second novel is called Bad Marie, and it's about a character who steals a baby and sleeps with somebody's husband. And the whole book, I think you should like her. She's my character. I love her. The book is called Bad Marie. She's bad, but I just want her to be sympathetic. So maybe I'm always giving myself a challenge, and
Mhm.
you know. But I think they are different. Having sympathy for somebody and liking them. You can have sympathy for somebody that you don't like.
Yeah.
I think you can also like people in fiction that you might not want to be friends with in real life too. They aren't real.
Yes. You
Yeah.
can like hanging out with a character or
Right.
hanging out in the head of someone, I think, yes, that you may not,
Yeah.
yes, actually want to interact with on a daily basis in your regular life. I hadn't really thought about it like that before, but I think that's totally true.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of humor in
Yeah.
this book. The characters are very funny in the things that they think.
Yeah. I think it's what they think. And humor's. I mean, I think I love humor, and it's important to me. And I don't ever try to be funny because if I sat down and tried to like make a joke, I don't know if I could do it. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I couldn't teach a humor class because I don't know how to teach humor. It's just that's just instinctive. I wouldn't do stand up comedy. Uh, yeah, but humor. I mean, I really want to be funny
Why do you
without
think
trying.
humor is important?
Yeah, I think it's important. Like right now, everything feels so bleak, and so sometimes I definitely feel very uncomfortable promoting a novel right now when
Mm.
I feel like our I don't even want to engage in that whole conversation and put you on the spot on that. But one thing I'm finding with this book, because it's humorous, is people are writing to me and saying, "Thank you so much for this book because it helped me get through this day."
Hmm.
And because I'm making people laugh and I'm distracted. And I think there's so many different ways that art matters. Like art can really matter because it can illustrate like inequities and really serious issues. And I guess people would say that this is not a serious novel, but I feel like I had a friend who the day after the election was miserable and prostrate, spent the whole day just reading my book and not looking at her phone, that maybe I did something good for her.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so that's something.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that because I feel like I've spent a lot of time lately really trying to just not look
Yeah,
at the phone
right.
and or the TV or whatever, then
Yeah,
and just engage in art, right?
yeah.
And books and literary works. This novel is about a lot. I think it is a serious novel. If I
Funny.
had to distill down
Mhm.
to two very general themes,
Okay.
I think I would say motherhood and privilege.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you.
What
Yeah.
what draws you to writing about motherhood and privilege? We talked about privilege a little bit, but
Yeah,
both of these two things.
right. Clearly, I'm writing about motherhood because I am a mother, and so that's just a great deal of my time and my thought. And yeah, what is it? Write what you know. Like that's what I know right now. So I'm definitely writing about that. And one thing in this novel, and I got away with this, which I wasn't surprised. It's not set in a particular place. It doesn't say it's in this town. It's not a New York novel. It's just sort of set in an affluent town, and it's set in. I live in Montclair, New Jersey, and so the town not mentioned is Montclair, New Jersey. And I guess it's a town that just has an incredible disparity between really wealthy people and people who are not. And it's a beautiful. I love this city and its public schools and everything is mixed. But I think it must be something I think about. It must be something I feel. It feels, as a middle class person, it feels so petty to want more. Do you know what I mean? Because like
Mhm.
I would say right now, like I'm talking to you right now, and I'm in my own home, and I just like love it so much, and I've had it for 3 years, and until then I've been a renter, so I'm just like so lucky. But I feel like anytime somebody has something, there's always people who want more or have more. It gets confusing. I
Yeah.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to mine.
Yeah. Mhm.
I've noticed that swimming seems to come
Yeah.
up a lot in your work. Hot Air obviously centers on a
Yeah.
swimming pool incident. Hurricane Girl
Swimming
opens
pool.
up
Very
with
nice. Has a lot of swimming pools. Yeah.
what is it about swimming that intrigues you as a subject?
That of course, that is, it's personal. Like that's something that I love to do, and I love to swim, and it's something I'm very aware of the fact that I know people who have swimming pools that don't share them for
Hmm.
sure. And like right now it's winter and there's nowhere to go swimming, and it makes me really sad. Like I hate winter because I don't swim, and the first thing people might say to you is, "Well, why don't you join a gym?" And there's a YMCA in my town that has a public swimming pool, and it's too crowded. You have to share laps, and I get anxious. And I winter's my least favorite season of all seasons, but swimming is something that's like a form of just pure pleasure. And so I think that's how it seeps into my work. And I'm a little embarrassed that I've had, I guess it would be triptych. I've had 3 books in a row where swimming pools are really important. And what I'm working on now, there's no swimming pool. And I feel kind of glad about that. Like I'm almost embarrassed by myself that I do that. There's one writer who the Japanese author. I think I use this as an excuse a lot. His name is Haruki Murakami, and somebody actually a long time ago on Slate or a website made Murakami Bingo, because it was just like, it was a joke, but it was terrific. It was like, anytime somebody drinks a whiskey, have a drink. Anytime somebody swims laps, because his characters swim laps. Every time there's a cat, he repeats himself constantly. His books even have sometimes the same kind of plots. But I love those novels. Like, for my 30s, those were the most influential books that I read. I read everything he did, and he just repeats the things that matter to him are the things that matter to him. And
Mhm.
I hope, like with him and with mine, every story is different enough, but kind of stealing the same framework that I put in a lot of books. Yeah,
Have you always been a writer?
I think so. That's something I got asked. Yeah, I have. I didn't publish my first novel till I was 35, which is young and not young. Like, I
Mhm.
wanted there are all these. I wanted to be a younger writer for sure. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
sometimes, um, I took my first creative writing class in college when I was a senior. My college at Haverford College at the time didn't have a lot of arts. There's a lot more now than when I went there. But that was the first time there was a class offered, was my senior year of college. And I got an A in that class, and the teacher just liked my work. Like, from the very first writing hand exercise we turned in, he read it out loud. And it was so nice to finally like feel good at something. And I knew in high school I wanted to write. I don't know why. I still actually don't know why it took me as long as it did.
Mhm.
But after college, I got a job. I got a job, and I moved to San Francisco. San Francisco is just so embarrassing full at the time of English majors who want to be writers. That's all we were. Everybody I met,
Mhm.
I felt like, wanted to be a writer and majored in English. But I didn't go to graduate school until I was in my 30s, so it took me a little while. And now it's what I do. So, but I think I always do. Yeah. I
What
wish
was
I could
the
answer a question in one sentence for you. I'm sorry about
No,
that.
I don't want you to answer it in one sentence. I love your answers.
Okay.
What was the road to publication like for you then?
Yeah. Um, I had graduated. I was out of graduate school. And the interesting thing is, after I finished graduate school, I moved to New York, moved to Astoria in Queens, and I had to get a job. And to me, like the scariest thing, and there's Joni in this novel, and like her greatest fear is like, if I don't sell this novel, I'm gonna have to get a job. And that's me. That's embarrassing but true. But after graduate school, I had to get a job. I was back to working in offices, which is what I had done before graduate school. And I was just afraid. And so with my first novel, which was Twins, I just worked on it really hard. I didn't socialize for a while. Weekends are like, no, I'm going to work on my book. You can go to this party. And I did that. And while I was in graduate school and before graduate school, and things are different now than they were, I published short stories. I published a bunch of short stories. And an agent had read one of my short stories and reached out to me and said, "Are you working on anything? I'm looking for books to publish." He was like a young agent.
Mm.
And that was how I got my agent. So that was really
Wow.
so lucky, because I know with so many writers today that that's the hardest step, honestly. Sometimes it can be harder to get an agent than it can be to sell a book.
Mhm.
But the agent who reached out to me, I said, well, I'm working on a novel, but I don't have anything right now. But when I do, and I literally got back in touch with him about 2 years later, and we agreed to work together. And after I had finished my book, he was able to sell it. So it sounds really easy, but I don't, it didn't feel easy at the time.
Did you continue on with the same?
Yeah, he's still my same agent. So we've been together since 2005, and every
Wow.
book that we've done. That's Alex Glass. And he's also one of my first readers. And so I feel really, really fortunate that I have that relationship. And I've joked with my daughter, I'm like, because she'll be like, who's important to you? And I'll be like, well, you're my most important person. And then it's Alex. Sorry, mom. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, yeah.
It's always great to hear about these wonderful relationships between these wonderful enduring relationships between
And I
writer.
know writers often switch. That just seems so scary. And I don't hope that never comes to pass. Yeah, he's really important to me. Yeah.
You, in addition to writing your own work, are also a developmental editor.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that
I
work?
would love, yeah. I mean, that's I feel like really fortunate in that I don't have a. I felt so spoiled. I don't have a job. Like, I don't go check in. I don't dress up. I don't go any work. But I can't earn a living just with the writing alone. Like, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so that is my skill. Like, that is what I can do. is I'm really good at reading other people's novels and helping them make them better. And it's work that I really enjoy doing, so I've been doing that. I've been doing that for like a long time now because honestly, I think I told you when I wrote Twins, I did have a full-time job and I got laid and I worked on that job until my daughter was born and I got laid off like while I was on maternity leave. And so that was
Oh my
like that
God.
was the end of no, but that was great because I had insurance for a long time and then I got laid off and then that was the best work that I could do because you can work from home and and it's just I think it's really I'm really lucky because I have an agent and my agent I never submit a book until it goes through him and he really edits for me. There's an idea that agents don't necessarily edit or editors don't edit, but my editors at my publishing house, they definitely edit too. But a lot of people aren't in a position where they have somebody for them. Not everybody, you need somebody to edit your work before you can submit it. And you
Mhm.
can be really fortunate and take being graduate school and or you could have really smart writing friends. But if you don't have that, I think it's so smart to hire somebody because you don't ever want to send your work out until it's at its best. And so that has been a job that works for me. And I've been supplementing my writing career for like more than 20 years doing that. And I'm still doing that. So,
Is there any one particular issue that you tend to see in drafts that most clients first send to you?
yeah, I mean, I think I think a lot of times, a lot of writing is it's hard to find your story. I find it, and I feel like a lot of times with first time writers, but really all writers, is they don't find out what their story is until they're writing it. And I talked
Mhm.
about this with a debut novel that whose name I would never say that. But like I love this book, but it was just too big. So I feel like I really help writers cut their work down to what the core of it is so they can get to what matters most. And I think that's the most important thing that I see, really.
Yeah, really distilling to that.
Yeah. Like, why do you start your story here? Why does this matter? Is there a plot? Sometimes writers are really scared of plot. I'm like, can we move this ahead? Can we go to a different location? Can we? Yeah. I
Mhm.
work in characters a lot. It's very easy and fun to improve dialogue, but it does change from writer to writer. Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you know now that you wish you had known before publishing your first novel?
Um, like I think I said before, I wish I had taken myself more seriously. Like I wish I believed in myself. I wish I'd started earlier. I wish I could have been a young writer. Like I wish I could
Mhm.
have published my first book when I was 30, so I could have been eligible for those. Like there's a New York Public Library Prize, like writers under 30. I didn't. I wish I'd started sooner. At the same time, there's so many writers that go straight from college to graduate school, and I feel like you have to live your life. Like I do feel like so much of my life it's embarrassing. You mine it for material, and so for kids that go straight from college to graduate school, it's good to live a little bit of life. Do you know what I mean? So I think I did do that well. I feel like the funny thing about life, and it's something that Oprah Winfrey said, it's very woo woo, but I feel like it's back to like, do you have any regrets in your life at all? And yeah, I do. But I do feel like those 2 years that I lived in another country where I was really unhappy, like that ended up going into my writing. Like I feel like maybe I couldn't start writing early. So, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like I feel like
Yeah.
this was the only way I could do it. But I do feel like self-doubt for everybody. Like I'm still plagued by self-doubt and it's just pointless and not helpful. And if everybody could just be like arrogant assholes, like that might be better. Do you know what I mean? I wish I had more of that. Yeah.
Yes, sometimes I'm jealous of people who seem to have a lack of self-awareness.
Well, there's that too, right? And so and then often they might not be the best writers, but I think it does benefit them to some degree. Yeah. But they might not be pleasant to be around.
What is your best advice for aspiring writers then?
It's really just to not wait for the perfect time. You know what I mean? Like not like if you really want to write, like you could start maybe not today. You could start tomorrow. You could really just start. Um, just not to put too much pressure on yourself and to not wait until you have the perfect desk and the perfect office. or even inspiration, not to wait for inspiration. Like if you really know that you want to write, you just have to sit down and do it. And there's a writer whose name I don't remember. She wrote this terrific essay that was literally like, I wrote my first novel in 15 minutes. And so if you're really scared of writing, which I think all writers are, is to say, okay, today I'm going to sit down for 15 minutes and I'm going to write. And you can do that. Like, that's not that scary.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, anybody who sits down to write for 15 minutes is probably going to write for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. You know, 15 is so short. But I would just say to any aspiring writer, there are so many things you could do. Like, I do think you should take a class. I do, you know, all of the things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think literally is just to do it and not wait for the perfect thing. Like, don't. There are all these like great summer writing things. There's so many things. If you get that, that's great. Like, I've had so many good writing experiences. I love going to writers' things. Curtis Sittenfeld is reading tonight in Montclair, and I'm going to go, and I know I'm going to enjoy it. I love that, and I find it inspiring, and I think all of that's good. But the main thing is just starting. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a traditional last question.
Okay.
On this podcast. When Hot Air is made into a movie or series, what do you think the theme song should be?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I literally don't know, but I know that I want it to be like Boy Genius or Phoebe Bridgers, because they've been really like big while I've been writing, like that. They're who I've been listening to a lot in the last 2 years. So I wish I knew the perfect Phoebe Bridgers song to suggest right now, but
It can just be a whole Phoebe Bridgers soundtrack.
I would love it. I think it could work, you know? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Marcy Dermansky, thank you so much for being here.
I really enjoyed it. These were great questions.
To hear Marcy's tips for building a community of writers, as well as the major do's and don'ts of querying agents, head over now to the Patreon. Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.